Hi, my name is David Casson,
I'm Shayna Levinson.
and thank you guys for coming to this workshop that we're giving on how to make great photo reference to paint from. And so we've been doing this for a couple of years now. Basically, what we're going to go over today is how to take good photo reference within indoor photo reference. This doesn't pertain really to going outside and taking photos. This is mostly what I've been using for my process when I go to visit survivors to paint. I bring this kit with me. This is what Shayna uses when we photograph Shayna as well, and it's pretty versatile. And it kind of gives us the kind of lighting that we want for something that's almost like a Caravaggio kind of painting.
Are we still freezing, guys? Someone said that we're freezing. I mean, I'm kind of warm.
You're freezing one.
Okay. Yeah, if we're freezing on our end, we're okay. It might be Wi-Fi on y'all's end, so just check that. But we're excited to bring this class to you guys because, when we teach in person, I do a lot of teaching from photo classes, and I always tell my students it's really important to have a good resolution of an image because the crisper the image, the more information you have, and then you're not guessing at what you're seeing. So, in areas like if you work from an iPhone and you zoom in and it gets really grainy, with a high-res image, you can zoom in and see every pore. Not that you're going to paint every pore, but it gives you the option to choose what you're going to put in the painting and what not to put in the painting.
Yeah, that's really important. The idea that what we want is we want more resolution, and more information is better than less information because we don't want to make up anything, at least with the type of painters that we are, where we're trying to capture something in reality and as lifelike as possible. And so it's very important to I don't think that working only from photos is necessarily a good idea. I think that a little disclaimer here that we're going to teach you guys how to get the best photo reference to work from as if it was you were working from life. So good color, good lighting, as if you were in the studio with the model. That's what I want my photo reference to be like, as if that model is sitting in front of me, as if I'm painting them from life. And so I want you guys to also, if you're really into figurative painting, and this is what you want to do and make a career out of it, you should go and paint and draw as much as you can from life as well as using photography. I think there's pros and cons to both. Oh, our puppy dog. I think there's definitely pros and cons to both. I mean, with photography, it's actually more affordable to be able to have a model in your studio at any time during the day, night or day, whatever you want to work for your schedule, versus having a person come and sit for you for a certain amount of time, them being uncomfortable on a model stand, but also understanding seeing things in real life when you're painting from life, and then being able to put that filter over top of the photograph. We'll talk a little bit about how photos do things differently than how the eye sees. For instance, the main thing I think is that a photo uses depth of field to really understand how things are blurry or where things are in focus, how edges are. With working from life, we understand how edges are based on different aspects of the mass and how they interact with the background with binocular vision versus only using one eye and using a lens. And we're going to talk about how the different lens distances can affect how things are in focus and not in focus. For instance, you want to go check our dog?
Yeah.
Our puppy dog, unfortunately, just got surgery a couple weeks ago. Anyway, so we want to basically make it so that we're using the photograph the way that we would as if we were painting something from life, if we want to make lifelike paintings. You can also be a photorealist. People consider us photorealists because I guess they see our paintings really small on an iPhone, and then things kind of become more photorealistic because you lose some of the hand texture and the tactileness that we like to have in our paintings. But the photos that we use, which we're going to show you guys some examples as well of what it is that we actually do. And those are pretty much I don't think that this working from photos is definitely a supplement from working from life. I think they go hand in hand.
You use the knowledge of working from life if you're working, when you're working from a photo. And you even set up working from a photo the same way. If you're right-handed, you want to have your photo to the left like you would a model, and then vice versa if you're left-handed.
Yeah, we talk a lot about that when we teach our classes, our online classes, because we don't have live models with the online classes as well. And this is kind of how we set up our demos and everything when we teach. So I'm going to kind of go through the document that we have, and it's I think about 17 or 18 pages. And we've compiled the PDF.
Which you guys will have,
yes.
or if you don't already have it.
Please download that right away, because I think that link only lasts for about 5 days through WeTransfer. And so if you guys get that right away, you can definitely find that and actually download it now so that we can go through it page by page. And that way it's easier for you guys to follow along. So you think we should do it through a screen share?
Invited in the room.
Invited in the room?
She didn't get a link. You want to email me the link so I can email it to her?
You're on the list. You should have it in your inbox, right?
Sorry.
Okay, no worries. I can send it to you.
No, I got it.
Okay, so we're going to kind of go into the document right now. We'll do screen share.
Yeah.
Cool. Oh, I knew that was going to happen.
Good as it, yeah.
Okay, so we're going to do one page by one page. I'm going to cover myself up.
No, put it in the center. There we go.
Sorry, guys. Is that good, Shay? You want to slide over a little bit, too?
So we're like this.
Do you want to slide together? Or be separate?
Oh, yeah, that's a good idea.
We might have gotten a fight right before this.
No, we didn't. David gets anxious before teaching. This is like a comedy routine.
Here we go.
Okay. Pass me water.
Yes. Okay, so we made this really cool PDF to kind of explain everything. The Brady Bunch. Oh, but the microphone will... Okay.
Because now I can't read the questions, though.
Wait a second. I can fix that.
Okay.
Can you now?
Yeah. Guys, welcome to our world.
Okay, cool. So hopefully you guys can read this and it's in the right frame of mind. It's not reversed at all. Cool. So this is the actual camera that I use that you guys can see. It's the picture in the viewfinder is of Shayna. Photo I think we took. She was working with a jewelry company.
That was from my jewelry painting workshop.
Yeah, that she just taught.
Yeah.
And so first we want to talk about the camera, what the DSLR camera is. So the lens is kind of separate, and it's got a release button. This is all pretty basic stuff. So we don't like to use iPhone pick photos at all, because I know it's easier, but it's a lot harder to control aperture, exposure, the speed of the film. The resolution isn't as high as what we want. And so we recommend DSLRs. You can get a Canon Rebel, which is pretty affordable. I think, and you can find them used as well. My first DSLR that I bought was a used Canon 5D Mark II, which I think I bought for $2,200 for the body used, which at that time that's around what you're probably going to be paying for a really good camera. Unfortunately, like the better the camera, the more expensive they are, unfortunately.
And you get use of it. I mean, it's an initial investment, but there are some online places that you can rent cameras as well. So
yeah, we have a list,
which we'll get to later.
Which we'll get to. That explains. Are you? Oh, jeez. I'll slide. Oh, I can slide this instead. Okay.
It was like.
Okay, sorry. So on the PDF, it kind of explains when you get your DSLR, kind of where everything is, right? So what we're going to be really concerned with is the mode dial. The shutter button is basically what you press to actually have the picture being taken. The viewfinder on the back has the LCD screen, which this is sometimes it comes out on a flap and you can rotate that.
That's what I have on.
She's got a separate camera that does that for video. And then on the top of if you go to the bottom, the lower right hand screen, the smaller screen, the LCD screen, I'm going to discuss that with my camera actually when we get into what aperture and exposure are, as to where those are located on the camera itself and what those numbers mean. Since we're using strobe lights, it's kind of a weird magic in a way to figure out how to use a strobe light to connect to your camera and then to shoot really good photos, because unless you have a light meter, that you can
Yeah.
kind of set up. We figured out kind of a foolproof way with the numbers within what your shutter speed is and your f-stop to get you really good photos that you can adjust in RAW format within Photoshop right away, which is pretty much we'll go through as well. And I actually included on the PDF, I don't know if you guys have zoomed a little bit further, some of the photos that we've taken and then the actual information with the f-stop and the exposure on each photo. So it gives you an idea what those will give you if you're using the camera. And so focal length is really important, especially when it comes to the type of lens that you guys use. I would recommend, if you're just starting out, just to buy like a 1.8 50 millimeter lens. You want it when you're, this is kind of for more photography based, this document, but we want to think about it in terms of just working from the model. I would go with a regular wide angle lens, which is a 50 millimeter lens, which means that, so if you go to the wide angle right there, on the second one from the bottom, it kind of has this arc that kind of comes from the camera lens. And what that tells you is that that's the area that's going to be within focus within a wide angle lens. Within a wide angle lens, it's going to give you a wider area that's in focus. And it also does not have any barrel distortion. Barrel distortion is where the head might become a pinhead or something, you know, like where it'll kind of stretch areas, or the face will be stretched out from the nose like a fisheye lens would do. We don't want any distortion at all. So
Did you say 50 millimeter?
Yes, 50 millimeter lens is the best lens that you can have for taking a portrait and a figure as well.
So one thing that's really important, and I'm only going to say this, I can get back to it later. When you're buying a lens to go with the camera, make sure they fit together.
Oh, little anecdote. Shayna bought a new for film, like as we're filming all of our demos. We looked up what the best camera is for filming, and she found that it was a Panasonic Lumix G5, I think, or G7? G5. And what's really amazing about that camera is I think it's a crop sensor, but I think that it's really mirrorless. Great for, it's a mirrorless, that's what's really, we were trying to find a lens for it, and I was really insistent. I was like, make sure the mount is the correct amount. And it wasn't when she got it.
I kept researching too. I was like, oh, I got it. This will be fine.
So make sure you're on the links here for Canon. We only use Canon, so I'm not sure.
For photographing.
Unfortunately, we're not sure about Nikon, but within Nikon, they're very similar to Canon. So these aperture and
50 millimeter prime sense.
Prime, yes, prime lens is great. So we're going to go into what the different types of lenses are, Shannon, as we go. So 50 millimeters is what I would stick to. Plus, they're a lot more affordable. The only thing that changes the price of a 50 millimeter lens is how low of light that it can go, right? If you can push it into lower f-stops to get it to work within lower light. But the lens that we have, with using a strobe light, you don't really need that low of light of a lens, because we're not photographing at night necessarily, because we're adding our light source onto the model. And so the 1.8 I think is pretty solid. I think I have a 1.2 and a 1.4, and I haven't noticed any difference at all. And that just tells you how much more open and longer the lens can stay open. So we talk about aperture now, right? So the aperture controls the amount of light that hits the film or the sensor plane. Right? I don't know if you guys ever did pinhole cameras when you were little, and how much how long the exposure is going to be within the camera itself. And so what we want to do is we want to make sure that the deeper your depth of field, the clearer the photos are going to be. If you have a shallow depth of field with the aperture and the exposure, it's going to be a lot blurrier. So I think this document pretty much explains it. So if you're letting less light in, it's going to be more detailed, right? So if you're at an f16, so the f8 is kind of right in the middle.
And that's at the setting that you're putting the aperture at.
Yes, so it's going to be
the numbers on the top, which we'll show you.
Which corresponds with the exposure of the photograph. So if you have an overexposed photograph, it says that you'll have more light right? So your f
So your face will look
2.8,
like this, that bright.
yeah, it'll be overexposed. But if your aperture is not open as much, it's not going to let in as much light. But more light in the aperture means it's going to be overexposed, right? So we kind of want to keep things we want our aperture to be small so that we're not letting in too much light, so that we have a good sense of chiaroscuro, light and dark on the face. And we also want clarity and depth. And that's what that's going to give us. It's going to give us a little bit more detail, as well as making sure we got all these.
Yeah,
okay.
I'm on it.
You're so good. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
If I'm talking too much, feel free to just
I'm projecting when I need
grab
to.
my leg, and I'll know that you want to talk. I don't want to filibuster here. So hopefully that makes sense. So also, if you want to use, if you look at the bottom here, we have a really good if you long exposure versus bokeh with low light, which means the background will be blurrier for sports and for landscape. And so there's a pyramid pretty much of where you have your aperture, your shutter speed, and your ISO. So we'll talk about those right here. So next up we have our shutter speed, which is also important, which is how long the lens is open for, right? So with my camera, you can keep it open for 1 second, but you're gonna need a tripod, because if your camera moves in any way, shape, or form, it's going to become blurry, right? So let's look at this little diagram here. So I'll read what it says, that the length of time your camera spends capturing an exposure. The longer the exposure, the more light, again, just like it'll be overexposed if it's open longer, your camera will capture. And keep in mind that motion blur can occur on longer exposures. So if your camera is open longer, right, there's more chance of something being blurred. And so that's why we like to use the strobe light versus using sorry, we're having some work done in our backyard. Let me explain this again. Sorry. So if a continuous light in the studio, right, with the model, if you were to take a photo of that model with just the camera in your hands without a strobe light, it's harder to capture that with holding the hand. You have to be super, super still, or there's going to be something that's blurred. And the model has to be also super, super still. And that's also the clarity and the making sure that your lens is in focus as well. So there's like 3 different variables that have to do with capturing something to be in crisp form where you don't have to move. So if you are shooting a continuous light on a model in a classroom situation or so, I would bring a tripod, put your camera on the tripod, set your aperture and exposure based on what the light is in the room, and then use a infrared clicker to a remote so that you can kind of click the camera without touching the camera. So that way the camera is stable and can capture that scene with as much stability as possible so it doesn't get blurry. But with the strobe light, what's great is that you can come off the tripod. We're giving like a burst of light that's coming in from one direction that is freezing the action completely. The model can even move. And that's why when you see fashion shoots, I guess, on TV, where they're like kind of dramatizing them, they have all the strobe lights connected to the cameras so that the models are moving and doing their thing. And that way they're getting crisp clarity to their photos. Now, a lot of times they use way too much light for what our purposes are as painters. We want to make sure that it's funny. I always say that I take really good photos for a painter, but really bad photos for being a photographer, right? So we always have there'll be something in the background, like a light stand or a pole that's kind of not obscuring the model view, but what a photographer would be like, oh, that's gross. Why do you have that in there? You know, it's like, so, but the reference photo for what we want within the model is super, super clear. And so shutter speed is really important. I'm going to show you guys on our camera where the shutter speed is versus where the f-stop is. Did you want to add in? I guess you didn't hear what I said.
No, but I mean, I know you said everything brilliant.
Okay, any questions at all about that? I don't want to go too fast for you guys. Again, we're here for 2 hours or more.
And we'll show you on the camera too, so you're not like, well, where will we find that on the camera?
Yeah, I just said that.
What is a strobe light? We're going to get to that for sure as well. We have pictures and all that kind of good stuff.
Yeah, we're going to go over exactly what the strobe light is, the strobe lights that we use. And the ones that we use are pretty affordable and pretty small. Mm-hmm. Easy to go around with. Because I like to actually bring a strobe light and my DSLR camera whenever we travel. Like if we're in someplace and I find someone that I want to paint that's really interesting looking, we'll coax them back to the apartment that we're staying at and say, hey, can we photograph you? Not in a weird way.
That doesn't happen.
So this is
a strobe light better than a light box?
Well, a light box is a little bit different than a strobe light. So you can put a strobe light within a light box, a diffuser, or you can just have a light box being a continuous light. It's better than a continuous light.
Yeah.
The light box is kind of it's just a diffuser. It's a light, either a continuous light or a strobe light go within to a light box. I'm guessing that's what you mean. Which is kind of like a gauzy white kind of thing that you shoot through. And we're going to explain how we shoot through. We actually use an umbrella instead of a softbox to shoot through to diffuse the light a little bit so that we get nice, good bridges of halftones between the light and the dark. And so we have our exposure triangle here. And basically what this is, the three really important aspects of understanding your camera is the shutter speed, like we talked about, the aperture that we talked about, and then the ISO, which is pretty interesting to talk about. Because I remember when I was a kid, you used to get these little disposable cameras when cameras were just film, and you'd get like a 800. Kodak had an 800 thing that was for low light, but if you used it in daylight, the film was really, really grainy. And so what that pertains to with when we take photos is I like to keep my photos between 200, 250 so that there's no grain in my photographs. The larger the ISO,
you open the ISO up page. We're on it right now, Helen. The ISO page.
Yeah, do we talk about that separately? I don't think I talked. No. I don't think there is a separate page for ISO. It's it did. Here it is.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Now we combine all three together.
Now we talk.
This.
Yes. Sorry, I totally
skipped over it.
Yeah, I ruined the surprise. So the ISO is
and
really.
This is a really important part too.
Yeah,
Thank you.
But Helen. I was explaining what this is. Thanks so much, Helen. So the ISO is it's basically the type of film that you're using within your camera. Even though there's no such thing as film right now, everything is on compact flash cards. So back then we just used to have 800 speed film, 400 speed film, 200 speed film, and what that does is the lower the ISO, the more detail you get. The higher the ISO, the more grain that you get. Now, the higher the ISO, the better it is to take low light photographs. The lower the ISO, the lower the ISO, the more light that you need to create the film, to create the image on the film. So what the strobe light is incredible because it gives a burst of light, and so the ISO, you can have a very low ISO with that burst of light, which is great. Versus if you're using continuous light, again, a light that's on the model in the studio, that's not a strobe, not a flash, to photograph, you need a higher ISO, which means that those photos that you take from the live model with a continuous light is going to be it's going to be grainier, and it's not going to have as much detail as someone just bought the class.
You didn't close it?
I didn't close it yet. I forgot. Anyway, they'll get the recording. The ISO is really important because it kind of helps us, again, to control the light and the dark and the grain and the detail. So we want, again, low ISO. So in this, it kind of... so it's saying right here, it says the same way that speed, and the higher the number, the brighter your photo will be. If you increase the ISO, you'll create more digital noise. So just like we talk about grain of old-time photos and photography on film, it's got digital grain as well. So again, we have the higher the ISO, the higher the number, the grainier the film, the lower, the clearer it's going to be. And so we go to the
Now we're at
Exposure
triangle.
triangle. And so the sweet spot for this, right, for what we want to do within the strobe light is that we want a really quick shutter speed, right, to capture the motion and also that burst. And we want to also have a like f16 or f20 is I think what we usually shoot with our aperture. So we want a really small aperture because we don't want to let a lot of light in because we want to get chiaroscuro. And then we want our shutter speed to be really fast as well. And then we want our ISO to be very, very low, if you guys are taking notes. So low ISO, quick shutter speed, high number on the shutter speed. The higher the number, we usually work around like
20.
I'm trying to think what are usually like 40 or 50.
Yeah.
Is my
and
shutter speed.
Depends on, also there's so many things that depend, which you're going to learn as you're photographing, that skin tones can vary and also change how dark or light you need to take the photo. What's going on around the studio, like the backdrop can affect the lighting as well. So, and where the light is located. So you'll play within those variations. You're not going to go greatly higher with aperture or greatly lower, and the same with shutter speed. But we are always clicking around with our camera and messing around with the numbers to just get different variations of light within the photo.
So Kathy asked, "What's the preferred shutter speed?" We're gonna go through that exactly. What's on? We have my camera here, right behind me, right here, and I'm going to show you exactly what I would dial in to shoot with strobe.
Low ISO and higher shutter speed.
Yeah.
Can you say what you want with the aperture again? The aperture, you want a higher.
We want our aperture to be very tiny, very small, and so we want a higher number.
Yeah.
With a higher number shutter speed and a low ISO. Yeah. It's funny. I'm always used to calling it ISO instead of.
Just so you guys know, this is not the same settings you guys would use if you're photographing your artwork, because your artwork will come out very dark.
Yeah, this is totally different than how we photograph. That's like another. That's another workshop someday.
Yeah, and videotaping. That's a whole other.
Yeah, video. Too. Yeah, we've been learning how to become tech people.
Yeah,
it's crazy. So another really important aspect of photographing our model, though, is the white balance as well. And what is amazing about the strobe lights, again, is that our strobe lights come in as daylight, as noontime daylight, right? So 55 to 5700 Kelvin, which if you look on this list, gives us a nice sense of flesh tones. And you can fix that in your camera. You can just put on your camera, you're going to want to put AWB. AWB stands for auto white balance. That's all you need to plug in to your camera on the DSLR, because it will read the light from the strobe light to be daylight. So that's super, super easy to understand. This is all through the manual mode. And we're going to talk about the different modes on the camera as well, on the dial.
Yeah, manual mode on that, as well as is it auto mode on the lens?
No, well, no, yeah, auto when we photograph the model.
So there's two different settings on the camera and the lens, which we'll get to, and we can talk about now too. But on the top of the camera, you can set it to manual, and then the lens is a whole other setting. So it's just two. You can either do auto or manual, and you'll want that to be auto because you want it to autofocus on the model as you're photographing her or him.
AWB. I'm sorry, auto white balance. Auto AWB.
Yeah.
Auto white balance. Cool. No problem. Great questions, guys. So any questions about white balance really quick? Also, we adjust our photography within Camera Raw. So our settings on our camera are set for JPEG and RAW. RAW.
And you have to manually do that because usually it comes preset is usually just JPEG.
Just JPEG. But there's in your mode settings, it'll say you want to go to the highest settings of resolution within your camera, and we're going to get to that as well.
Yeah, and you'll want both. So your card file will fill up because you're going to see a JPEG and a TIFF or a CR2 file, or what else could it be called?
No, you're only going to get JPEGs or CR2s.
CR2s. But sometimes it can be something else.
No.
CR2.
CR2. That's after you bring it into RAW. That's just the RAW. It's the RAW. What cameras do now, which is pretty amazing, is that the photograph happens, but they turn all the information that the photo is taking in, and they turn it into ones and zeros, which is how a computer kind of reads information. And that way, it's almost like just a document, like a file that is all text that tells it exactly what the photograph should be doing. And it's really easy to edit within a raw format. So it's giving you, suppose they call it raw because it's giving you the raw data for the photograph. So the photograph just exists as computer speak.
Does the white balance affect the values?
No, the white balance does not affect the values.
You have it on auto. If you didn't have it on auto, then it can affect the values. But you just put it on auto. Do you balance strobe to warmth or light in the room? How do you count the ambient lighting?
Okay, so with the strobe light, again, we'll talk about this. It destroys any ambient lighting, any reflected light off white walls. I always photograph with a white wall or a wall that's lighter whenever I travel. If I'm meeting with a survivor to
that
photograph
way the darks aren't all dark. That way it does have something reflecting back on it.
Yeah, I don't use a gray card either because we just adjust from our eye within Photoshop.
And then, of course, the painting process is a whole other thing.
Yeah, well, the reference is easy to get, I guess. Yeah. It's easy to take a photo.
Once you get all that hard work done, then the real work begins.
Yeah, but
how do you use
about the yeah. So next up, we got the shooting modes, which we were just kind of talking about. Yep. So we have auto mode, which it controls everything. We don't want to use that. We want to use manual, which gives us full control over the aperture, shutter speed, and ISO. So that way we kind of almost don't want to even worry about a program mode or shutter speed priority, any of those necessarily. Just focus on manual so that we have more full control over everything of those three aspects. Just want to make sure we got.
Yeah, I'm in. How about using a gray card?
I use a gray card only in like a little prism kind of thing. Sometimes when I photograph my art, just to kind of see what the colors are in relation. But usually it's just judging things by my eye as to how I want them to be. Sometimes I want them to be lighter. Sometimes I want them to be warmer. And I can adjust that again in RAW, Photoshop RAW. Oops, shooting modes. So this is pretty basic. And so within your camera, you'll have this grid right here, exposure compensation. And if you hold down,
at the very bottom,
yeah. Usually for continuous photography, you can adjust how that is. Within the strobe, you're not going to be able to use that as much because within the strobe lighting, because it's so instant, it's just about knowing the shutter speed before you start and adjusting it from there by eye. Again, we'd use the exposure compensation kind of thing for photographing our artwork. Yeah. Or videotaping, because I like to videotape under like 1 under 0, for instance, because I kind of like a darker image to work with rather than having to bring everything down in value, because sometimes I get a little overexposed when I film video. So depth of field is, again, understanding kind of how a camera sees things versus how we see them as human beings, right? So I've talked a lot in my classes with the students about edges of slopes and how if it's a faster speed of slope into the background, that's a harder edge versus a slower slope, which is a softer edge. Cameras are very indiscriminate about that. It's really about the distance from the end of the lens and how the exposure and the shutter speed are how the exposure is being placed and how much light you're letting in to be able to get more in focus versus less in focus. And I think that just kind of describes it pretty well. Again, it's almost like the ears would be out of focus because they're slightly bokeh. Bokeh is a term that the background's completely blurry and kind of abstract and out of focus versus as you kind of come closer to the center of the lens where the nose is perfectly crisp. And you see that all the time in people that are photorealists. You know, they want to capture that look exactly how a photo does, and that's what they do. Cool. Just want to make sure you guys are hearing us out there because I'm getting kind of low readings on our audio. Okay, great.
We hear you.
Feel free to ask questions too, guys.
Awesome.
So we're going to talk about the lenses really quick. Now, there's a zillion different types of lenses for different
Zillions.
things. If you want to have, I tend to go with a standard wide angle lens, which is kind of it's almost like a prime lens. Prime lenses are a little bit more expensive and a little clearer. Um, I don't know if I have a prime
Is that what I
50.
bought?
You have one prime, I think, but primes are like usually a couple $1,000s, but they're really really good. They don't do any zooming or anything. They're stuck at a certain number, like a 50 millimeter lens. If you do get a prime, I would say get a prime 50 millimeter lens. It's really great quality, but you can get away with a standard 50 millimeter lens that you can buy with an f1.8, which will probably be $150, for a lens, which is a good standard. And then you can kind of go off to a
Upgrade from
prime lens.
there.
And I haven't even upgraded because I don't need it. I don't need that crisp of an image. A wide angle lens, if you want to, we've been using these for videotaping stuff. Zoom lens, we don't necessarily need a zoom lens unless you want. They don't really work with the strobe light.
Can you explain why we would not want to zoom? Well, I mean, usually when we're photographing, we're right near the model, so we don't have to zoom in too much. It gives you just enough information. But we have a camera that zooms in, a lens that zooms in.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, but they're mostly for the filming. We want to zoom in over our shoulder for filming. When we photograph the model, we barely ever, unless I'll just back up if I want to get the full figure, but I don't want any barrel distortion. Again, if you're off that 50 millimeter, you're going to get lens distortion, and so I want to keep everything locked at 50. And if I have a zoom on my lens and I'm not cautious of it, I can zoom into the areas of the
And be
model,
out
which
of that
gives me a
50.
lower focal point,
Yeah.
because it basically, a wide angle means it has a wider like breadth to it, right? And then it kind of, as a telephoto, gets narrower and narrower and narrower. If you look at that first graphic that we or second
So you
graphic
recommend
page,
a standard or a wide angle?
I would recommend a standard. If you are doing other filming as well, a wide angle is good too, but I think a standard 50 millimeter lens. Um, I mean, a wide angle has a 50 millimeter lens in it. It's got a range. It's a little bit more range. I wouldn't recommend a telephoto or a macro, unless, I mean, a macro, if you want to do paintings of insects and you want to paint something that's super close. People paint insects and butterflies and stuff. Macro gets really close detail. To be honest, I'm not actually sure about how a macro affects the barrel distortion because I don't use them ever.
Is adjusting for barrel distortion in Photoshop RAW not advisable? I mean, it's not advisable.
I think what we want to do is we want to get the photo to be as easy to use within RAW than to start pushing around and pulling distortion stuff. Now, as an artist, you have that license to be able to make things distorted, but I think I always don't like to have something digitally adjusted,
You
if
just
that
never
makes
know if
sense.
you're gonna not get something correct with angles, or if you make something too long or too wide. It's the easiest thing is just to take it into Photoshop and adjust lighting, as opposed to having to figure out if the figure is distorted or the face is distorted.
Someone asked about the standard 85 millimeter. I
We have can you
oh
you can't use telephoto at all, or do you just need to be super aware of the focal length?
Yeah, be aware of the focal length. I mean, you can, but again, also lenses over time get a little bit looser, and so sometimes even if like you just have it down just a little bit, it'll sneak up on you. So I'd be careful.
So
I tend to, if we're just kind of starting out taking pictures of
yeah.
portraits and try to keep things in focus and without barrel distortion, I would go, and affordable as well. I would stick again with a standard 50 millimeter lens.
I think macro lenses. Oh wait, I
Someone,
understand the 50 millimeter, but why are standard portrait lenses 85 millimeter?
yeah, I'm not sure. I haven't even heard that there are standard portrait lenses. To be honest with you, so I'm not sure. I'd have to research that. I didn't realize. I don't think of lenses as a portrait lens. If you have a link at all, I'd love to read that. That portrait lenses are set at 85. That could be something that a photographer has. Also, photographers, they don't care about distortion like we do as painters. They don't care about areas like where, again, my side of my face is way overexposed right now in this video. If we're painters, we don't want to paint this me on this web screen right now. So there's different goals that I think a portrait photographer would have than what we would have as a portrait photo reference person. Like we're getting reference to make a painting.
I think macro lenses need really good light and have a very shallow depth of field.
Oh, okay. That makes it. Yeah, I don't have any
just,
experience with them at all.
I was told 50 millimeter was more of a portrait lens by a photographer.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I mean,
again, you know, our photos aren't necessarily pretty or perfect. As long as we have the lighting that we need and all the information there, we're not creating something that's going to go into a fashion magazine. Or that we're going to technically like frame and put up in our house, you know.
Other photos. Sometimes of the kids. I'm really good at back to school.
Like photographing them for painting.
I'm really good at first day of school pictures.
85 millimeter is good for portrait because it has had little distortion for portraits.
Okay. I'm sure there's some wiggle room between there that you're going to get less distortion from like 70 or 50 to 85, 87, whatever. But I think 50 is a good rule of thumb because also having a 50 millimeter lens keeps things also more in focus. Again, because you have that wider width. Cool. Any other questions at all? Can you guys mute yourselves really quick? Because I just want to make sure.
Keep hearing a little bit of noise.
Someone's eating crackers.
So if I have a better quality 30 millimeter lens, I would be better off using my 50 millimeter lens, correct?
Yes. Yeah. So again, low light. We're talking exactly. I guess I can mute everybody. Let me do this. Mute all.
Okay. Here we go.
Okay, now where was I?
Mm-hmm. Good, you can.
Okay. So just like we were talking about before,
no, you don't have to save your questions for the end. We want you guys to definitely ask as we go because we'll be answering in the moment, which is good. Thanks for asking.
Yeah. Okay, so then the low light. What we were talking about before. So continuous light versus a strobe light. So we're going to be basically using the external flash on this graphic right here. So prime lens, again, focal length, very, very high quality. If you're going to use low light, because they can handle, they're built for low light.
Can you also close other videos, please?
Oh, so remote shutter release is that when you're photographing the model in a studio, with a continuous light, again, just a regular light source on the model, like we would use at the Art Students League, which would be the sun. So we can't really turn the sun off. But I would set up a tripod because I don't want the camera to shake at all, and I wouldn't touch the camera. I would use a remote shutter release, like it's showing here, which is there's wired ones. I use an infrared one that just uses the front of the camera, which is pretty simple. I don't even think it takes batteries, does it?
Mm-mm.
Anyway, we have a couple of those floating around our space that we use
for. They just match up with all of our cameras.
Yeah, and we use those mostly to photograph our own artwork. So we're not touching our camera when we're photographing our art because we are using continuous light at 45-degree angles to photograph our art for social media and such and such. And so this kind of just gives you a little idea of kind of what you should have for indoor versus if you're using a flash at this bottom graph, right? You don't need a tripod. Right, and what your ISO should be is 100 to 400. Your aperture f4, f8, depending on the strobe, and then your stars. Like if you're outside, you would definitely need a tripod versus not using a flash. City lights, you wouldn't use a flash. Candles, again, no flash, no tripod.
So is prime lens better for low light?
A prime lens is the best lens you can get. They're way more expensive, but yes. Good question, Kathy. Next up, we have what is a DSLR camera?
I solely draw. Can you get high contrast black and white photos with clear details? Yeah, so I mean, what we draw as well, I would still suggest taking it in color and then just pulling it into Photoshop and making it black and white. You'll get great detail from that, as opposed to taking it in black and white.
Yeah, I mean, there are filters within digital cameras, kind of like artistic filters, where you can take things without saturation, which turns it black and white. But you can have a full color photo, so when you start painting, because who knows, you might start painting or drawing with color. You can it's easy just to drop the saturation out in RAW format again, which we're going to show you the RAW format as soon as we just go over like what the DSLR camera is and kind of what the pros and cons are. So I kind of wrote this up a little bit here just to kind of understand, kind of tell you guys. I know it's so tiny. I'm having a hard time kind of going through it.
Yeah, no problem.
In fact, some of the icons here are getting in the way. So yeah, which was kind of crazy. Do you guys know the DSLR camera was only invented in 1999? Makes me feel so old.
What was the camera before that?
Well, old digital cameras weren't as hardcore. Like the digital cameras used to be just like an iPhone, like 3 megapixels, I think, but
Yeah.
super. Now the iPhone, I think, is what, like 11 or 12 megapixels. For instance, like the camera I have that I use that I recommend on here is, I think, 50 megapixels. It's like a lot of resolution. So what's great about it, again, you can interchange the lenses. It's super versatile with batteries going in and out of it. There's no lag. It works really well with the strobe lights. This is our DSLR right here, pretty basic, with the our standard kind of 50 millimeter lens. You can see right here, 50 millimeter lens. And so you guys can feel free to read that. And then we're going to go through, I think, which is more important is probably the photographs themselves.
I got it.
Oh, sorry, we have someone at our front door. We don't have a doorbell, actually. It doesn't work. Except our dogs are our doorbell. So this camera is a 5DS. I bought this 3 years ago to photograph Holocaust survivors when I went out to Los Angeles. And I wanted really, really the highest resolution camera I could get at that time, which was, this is a 50 megapixel camera. How can I tell what lens? So you have a DSLR you don't know how to use. Hopefully you know how to use it now because we're going through it. The lens, it should have the numbers on the side of the lens, right? So this is a 50. So the camera will have the numbers. Yeah, so that'll help tell you. And then it tells you kind of how low the light is. It should. Yeah, so mine's like a F18, I believe, on here. I've had a few different ones that I've gotten. So I used to live in New York City, which is right next to B&H, or B&H is in New York City. And so I used to go to B&H and buy tons and tons of lenses every now and then to play around. So here's what we got within RAW, right? So the top is a photograph that I took, and I kind of want to show you guys different ideas that I use for lighting for models. So this was above lighting, straight above. The light is a strobe light, and it was on a tripod. And so what's really cool is, so in the photograph you lose all this information, right? All this information in the shadows and the eyes, in the plane underneath the nose, and that cast shadow. What we can do within what's up?
Did you mean bringing other lenses to show the difference where you can find numbers?
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah, Shayna's going to get some more lenses. We use a lot of the different lenses for filming our process and getting detailed shots over the shoulder and all that stuff. Okay, so then in the bottom here, we have what I've done. I've kind of upped the shadows. I've taken the shadows up a little bit to be able to see exactly what's going on within the shadows. Now, if I were to paint this, I have my choice of painting it dark or light, but I want to understand what information is going on within the shadow shapes. And so sometimes when I paint from the references, I want to make sure that I can see what's in the dark and see what's in the light, as well as getting a nice chiaroscuro going. Using the 50 millimeter lens, I'm approximately, I don't know, maybe like, it just depends on how I want to frame up the model. This is, you can look at the bottom, it's kind of, there's more to this photograph than is portrayed here. And so I think I'm probably back 4 feet, 4.5 feet. So it's not a socially distanced thing, I guess, being a art photographer. What? Oof. So this is, yeah, dogs. So on our lens here is really quick. So see where it says 28-135? And sometimes they have like shake, different lenses, different brand names have image stabilizer and Sometimes they're gimmicks, sometimes they work. But this is an older lens of mine, and it's pretty loose, so it just, gravity kind of can take hold, and so it's really hard sometimes to keep it set on a 50 if I want it.
The bottom picture is the photoshopped version.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
The top is the raw straight from the camera, and then below it is my adjustments within Photoshop Raw.
And the top one, I mean, can be a cool photo, but as a painting, it'd be really hard to work from because you're losing a lot of information in the shadows. Plus, if you painted it all that dark, could make her face shape look odd. So you go into Photoshop and get more of that information, and that allows you to, if you want to paint it darker, you still can, but you need to have that information there. So Photoshop's a powerful tool for lightening anything that you need to within darker images.
Yeah, hopefully you guys can zoom in on the PDF that you guys have on your computer to kind of look. And you can tell the difference even in the histogram, which is kind of the record of the lights and darks and where they kind of sit within the photograph, which is at the top versus the one on the bottom. And it is the same photograph.
We always go in and adjust photos when we're working. Even if we think it's going to be a great photo, we still adjust it in Camera Raw. When you pick the photo to alter, do you use the actual photo or the file thing?
I use the Camera Raw file, and I'll show you guys really quick. In this presentation, I have one that's a JPEG, and I have one that's a CR2 file, and you can see actually the difference in the size. Now, Photoshop Raw, if you look at the very bottom underneath here, it can export this digital file into 999 pixels per inch or whatever. That's the resolution is 999, which is overkill. You don't need it to be that large of an export. So usually I'll come in, sometimes I'll export it that way, and then I'll downsize it to about, 300 resolution or 600 resolution, depending on if it's a full figure or just a portrait. And so that's kind of, Raw is again a very powerful tool. You can see also on the right hand side where there's the saturation. I think it's at the very bottom of the list. Again, it's really hard for me to see on this document. I'm going to go to the next page.
Someone asked, can you achieve this without a strobe light and use a lamp? The only reason you can't really just use a lamp is because then you have to have your camera on a tripod. The strobe allows you to take the photo and have a crisper photo.
Yeah, before we were talking about how if you have you're saying a lamp is that's a continuous light. When we say continuous light, we mean and also that light, it depends on the type of light. If it's a halogen, if it's a fluorescent, there's different qualities to the temperature of the light that's going to be portrayed in the photograph, and you have to match that with your camera as well. So that's a little bit more difficult.
And then you'll want it on a tripod because any movement, that light isn't gonna, the photo will be grainy.
Well, blurry also.
Blurry.
Yeah, because you have to have the model hold still. You can't take the camera off the tripod to shoot different angles as fluidly because you got to be stuck on a tripod to photograph. And then you shouldn't touch your camera either. You should use the infrared clicker remote control so that it keeps it from getting blurry again.
Do you use a full frame camera? Does it make a difference for reference photos?
It depends on the resolution. So a full frame camera is going to give you higher resolution. This is a full sensor camera versus a crop sensor, but crop sensor photos are just as good. I don't want to say that you guys should have only a full sensor because I believe a Canon Rebel is a crop sensor, and I think a Canon Rebel will give you guys really great reference photos as well.
So all the pictures we're showing you are taken with the strobe, and the lighting appears different because it's how we bring the light up. When we're messing with the height of the light, it'll be up higher, up low, lowered. So they're all from the same camera and strobe.
Also, the power of the strobe. You can adjust the power of the strobe,
which we'll talk about.
We'll talk when we
have our strobe here.
When we bring out the strobe, we want to just feed you guys all this information.
Do you have a distance of the light to the model that you prefer? We
always experiment.
So many different, I mean, it's like a workout when photographing a model because you're lowering the light, you're moving it around, you're putting it in front, directly in front of you, and then you're moving, trying to get around the bar so that the bar is not in the photo. So definitely play with that. I mean, my last photo shoot, which was a long time ago, since we can't be around other people. I played around with underlighting, which was a lot of fun. So definitely play with different angles and distances, because that will show you how you can get different kind of lighting within the photo reference.
Also, we use different reflectors as well, which are also on the list, to kind of bounce light into different areas. So say there's a part of the photos that, like, when I've done full figures, the single strobe light sometimes isn't enough light to cover the entire figure, so I'll bounce light in from the strobe,
and that's when it gets crazy,
to like the lower part of a model's
you
body.
have like white sheets or a white foam core board lower, so that way you're getting equal light on the full figure of the model. So
we actually recommend white foam core boards. Are always great to have as well if you're going to a shoot or if you have your own in-home place. We have a lot of foam core sheets. It's funny, I was just being interviewed for a documentary a couple days ago, and the guy had foam core sheets, and he's bouncing light off exactly how we do for photographing the model, but for video. And I was like, oh, we have some of those if you need them. He's like, what? Oh, okay. Like, we have tripods.
Knowing that a natural north light would be considered consistent light, would you still use a strobe?
Yeah. I mean, do you mean a continuous light?
Yeah, again, continuous light.
Continuous light you'd still, even if you had daylight, you'd still need to have that camera on a tripod, with a remote, so you don't touch the camera, because any movement of the camera is gonna shift. Any movement of the model is gonna be blurry. So a strobe comes in at daylight again, which is, but it's daylight that you can move around the entire model,
and you can adjust the power of that light as well.
Yeah, so it's way more versatile than now. If I was painting from life, Northlight Studio would be perfect.
Light is fine.
Yeah, it's perfect.
But then we use binoculars too, so that's our camera.
No, the binoculars are for seeing broken color. Anyway,
and for
angles and just being awesome. And weird.
Maybe explain why a strobe light helps stop model motion or camera shake.
Okay, great question. So we had talked about this earlier about how we want a really high shutter speed, right? Which means that the shutters only open a fraction of a second, which is the amount that a strobe is strobing. So the strobe is really quick. And it just flashes like you'd see in an old-time photo, like it pops, right? That's exactly how fast the shutter speed. It's in relationship to the shutter speed, which is also that fast, which means that we're getting low light, super detail photos in that time frame. And so again, if you have your aperture open longer, it's going to let more light in, which is going to make the photo have either more light and also be blurry. So it's harder to maintain a photograph that's what we want to work from. And you get better reference when you have more control over your light source than having to not hold your camera, keeping it on a tripod again.
And moving it and telling the model not to move.
Don't move. But imagine we can get a lot more natural head positionings and different things going with a model. I photograph her for some of her paintings that she paints. Not all.
Well, all the paintings of me.
I photograph her. So
but I photograph all my own models. Yeah.
And so what we do with her, we almost do do this hand gesture, and we'll talk about that too. Is we want photographs that don't have weird lumpy hands that are missing.
We see a lot of paintings where people do this. And it looks like their hand
is gone. So we want, as painters, we want to be able to have the hands be expressive, and so we're always we tell our models open your hands up a little bit so that we can see all the fingers, so things aren't getting cropped as well. And it's much easier for people to make more hand gestures as they're going that aren't blurry at all because we have a strobe light again.
My Northlight Studio only has the best light on a sunny snowed-in day. The forest makes light green in the summer. Had no idea at first here. Oh, that's crazy.
Yeah, it sounds beautiful.
We'll be right over. We have blackout shades in our studio. We want no light anywhere from outside in our studio because we hate glare and we hate fighting the light. We just want to paint at 6 in the morning and have that light the same as at 8 at night.
Yeah, so we have we pipe in daylight. Oh yeah, it's a great, photographing kids is easy with a strobe light. We just photographed our neighbor's son.
Our good friend's son
for the Portrait Society conference. And we were able to get. He wanted to jump up off the bench.
He was moving like crazy.
He wanted to do all these crazy gestures.
The only thing we had to do crazily was David was photographing and I was adjusting the light.
She was moving the light.
So it's helpful when you have two people because like when you have somebody moving that much, you need to get the light up and down. So, hire an assistant.
He was showing off for you the whole time.
He was so cute.
He has a crush on Shayna. Don't we all? Okay, so anyway, really quick. So in this photograph right here that you guys have on your PDF, I thought it'd be really extremely helpful to include the information on the actual image. Now this is a JPEG, but if you guys can zoom in hopefully and see like so much of the detail within this photograph. But it also tells us what the f-stop is. It's just really, really tiny. Unfortunately, I can't make this bigger.
You want me to pull up my phone?
I can just jump up. It says that the f-stop is 29, and our exposure rate is 140. So what that is that's 1/40th of a second is the shutter speed, right? And then the f-stop is really, really high. So that kind of gives you guys what you should plan your camera for. Right here, I'll show you guys really quick. See if we have any battery life here. So to show you guys, hopefully it won't reflect too badly on the camera. Are those kind of reversed? So where I have 30, where it says 30, wait, yeah. So the 30 is my aperture, my f-stop.
And that's the top, you were showing where you were messing with.
So right in here, this right here, this number, I don't know if it's coming in reverse for you guys, where it says 0 and it's got like the apostrophe 2. I think it's a 2 or a 5. Oh, it's a 5. Is it in reverse? Let me mirror our screen. Can we do that? You know how to do that, right?
Yeah.
You're the expert on that. No pressure. We're gonna mirror our screen so you guys can see this. It's gonna throw the whatchamacallit out of whack.
Oh wait. Maybe I know how to do it on
Is it Zoom?
Yeah, it's Zoom.
Okay, do it on Zoom then.
And then I'm gonna close this. Sorry guys.
Go over. Right there. Preferences. Oh, okay, cool. She's my video expert. Mirror my video. Perfect. Okay.
Oh, that looks so odd.
I'm gonna move this out of the way just a little bit because I can't I'm reaching over the top of it. Okay, just really quick. So to kind of show you guys kind of what we got on the camera again, a little bit better here. So hopefully it'll come into the webcam. How come it looks the same then?
Because you're on eCam.
Oh. Does that look? I'm gonna go to Zoom then. Does that look okay? Yeah, okay. Now that looks good. It didn't change for us. Someone's saying it's still backwards.
Is it?
Even on Zoom, we swapped everything on Zoom. Maybe it's just for us to see. Okay. Well, anyway, you'll have two numbers at the top of your camera, right?
It's still backwards.
Yeah.
Sorry, guys.
Two numbers. We have this number right here, which is the f-stop, they call, which is your aperture.
You're sharing eCam, not Zoom.
Oh, okay. That makes sense. So then over here is our shutter speed. So where it says 50 or 5.1 is our shutter speed. And so we have one dial, my dial right here. So this handles my shutter speed back here, right? And this handles my f-stop. Jeez.
You're not seeing it.
I gotta move over here because it's all reversed.
Let me go back to eCam because it doesn't matter. There you go.
Okay. So those are the two numbers. So we have at the top, right? We have so this is saying that it's going to be open. My aperture is going to be open for 1 second, which is a long time. When you go higher with the numbers of this, like 40 is I think what we had for the this photograph right here that was taken. But no, that's the exposure time. Yeah, exposure is 1/40th of the time. So if I push this up to 40, that gives my shutter super, super quick, right? And so then the number right here, which is 11, which can be reversed either way because it's always 11, is my f-stop. A small mirror. Yeah, it should. We don't have a small mirror to reverse the thing. It's fine. I think you guys can get it though. There's only literally two numbers. You have an f-stop and you have your shutter speed, right? Within it. And so again, the back, my dial right here handles my shutter speed, and then this little dial up here handles my exposure. And you can kind of push and pull them together to kind of get the right exposure that you want. Now, whenever I do take photos with strobes, I take some test photos just to see if I'm overexposed or underexposed. And then if I'm overexposed, I make the shutter speed faster, right? Or I make the f-stop lower. Does that make sense? And I tend to keep my I tend to keep my shutter speed as high as I can go. So on my camera, it goes up to 22, and that just depends on how the lens is. Some lenses can handle a faster shutter speed. And so I always automatically throw it up to 22, and then I adjust from there, pulling it down. And then my f-stop changes. You can see that my battery is kind of blinking here a little bit. And then right now I have it on Kelvin for my, and at the bottom we have our ISO. See, my ISO is set for 640. Again, geez. Sorry guys. My ISO is right there. It's 640 right now because I'm actually filming video. So my video is usually 640. I usually drop that, and that, again, the buttons are different on each camera, but they're pretty easy. Where it says right here, it says ISO or ISO, and the ISO kind of pulls down to 250 when I take photos of the model. And again, AW, we have our white balance on here. I don't know if that makes it easier to see. Probably not. WB is white balance, and that shifts also to auto white balance. Again, the diagrams and the other documents should hopefully get you guys through that. And on these photos right here, I want you to have this as a guide so that you know how to adjust your camera to your strobe light. And on the strobe,
this is a JPEG, so it'll.
Yeah, so this is a JPEG, and then next we have, I put, and this is Rembrandt lighting from the side. I thought it'd be kind of cool to kind of show you guys top-down lighting from right above the first image that we had, this one.
But we would print it as a raw file.
Print it as a raw file?
I mean, print it high res.
Oh, we use a raw file because the JPEG is only going to get you so far because a JPEG is already 72 DPI, but it's a big file. It's got a lot of pixels in that, but it's still it's large, but it's still only 72 DPI. But it's a larger file. Here you'll have a smaller file, but it'll be packed with higher resolution. So right here we have this, this is the JPEG right here, and then next we have, which has the side Rembrandt lighting, and then I decided to throw in a profile, which the light is actually right in front of her,
so
coming down.
I'm not sure, what is the f-stop you like for strobe and ISO? So ISO is around 250.
250, so that it's not a grainy photograph. We want it to be,
lower
ISO.
But not 100. It's not as low as like 100. We like
250 is perfect.
Good. Yeah, so we set it at 250.
And then our f-stop is around 40.
And then we mess with that a little bit depending on the model, depending on
the distance of the light from the model.
Yeah.
Also changes the amount of light that the strobe is going to give you, the intensity.
So if it's around that, so you can go, like sometimes we'll do 25 to 45. So you just play around with those numbers.
And those numbers, again, I have them right here on these images to show you kind of an example of what image you're going to get if your ISO is exactly what we have here. So our f-stop, where it says f number, is f29, and then our exposure time is 140. So that the exposure time on here is our shutter speed. So our shutter speed is 1/40th of a second. And again, that does change based on, within the strobe lights, we can adjust the amount of how much light comes out of the strobe light. And so we adjust accordingly. Usually I put the strobe light right in the center. So there's analog strobe lights as well as digital strobe lights. And we'll go through those as well. I hope we're answering all these questions.
Yeah, if anything's confusing, please ask us.
Yeah.
There's a lot of information here. So we're throwing a lot at you.
Next up we have...
you guys be taking pictures. We're not going to physically take pictures. These are pictures we've actually taken for the work, like for a photo workshop. So that's what we're showing you here. We've thought about setting it up here, but it would have been too challenging to come back and show you guys the camera. So what David's done is he set up what is on the camera setting that you would see if you were physically in person looking at our camera.
Yeah. And also kind of the different lighting situations. So I brought the light down with this one. So it's almost slightly above eye level, only slightly above eye level. And then we used a reflector to bring light into those shadows.
And reflectors, you can buy different types of reflectors. We have a pack that you can cover. It's like one big round.
Yeah, it's cool. Like it starts out like
umbrella.
Small, and it goes. Whoosh.
And then you can do different covers on it. So it comes white, and there's covers that are silver, gold. And there's an image that we have on the PDF that you guys will see of different.
And there's just a white. There's a white diffuser. There's a silver and a gold.
But really, you can use anything. If you have like
again
a fabric of any sort that you can tighten and put there to reflect. So
and you can reflect different colors into the lights and darks into areas. So
in all the photos, you're using a reflector light for the ambient light in combo and the strobe. Not all the photos. This photo right here has a reflected light, and you can see the difference from the first really dark photo that there was no reflected light. This one has a reflected light because you're getting more information. So this one does not have a reflected light.
This one doesn't either.
Have a reflected light, and then the one before that does not have a reflected light either.
So we wanted to kind of show you guys the versatility of what you can get. So you can fill in the light. This right here was altered in
Photoshop.
In Photoshop Raw, but then.
So the reflected light is on the opposite side of where the light is going to be, because that's where it's going to flash from and hit on the opposite side of the figure. And then that will, and you guys see reflected light a lot within even like the chin, like you'll get reflected light from clothing. So you'll see different clothing colors.
Or even like a bare chest on a woman or whatever. Like
you'll get the light of the skin. Top on. Yeah. Can you do a setup diagram, just a quick idea of how you might set up the equipment?
Yeah, we're going to show you guys that. Yeah. We're going to set up the strobe light and kind of show. We actually shoot with the strobe light into an umbrella.
I didn't get the bar.
No, we don't need the light. It's going to be fine.
Is it just my lens? I think my shutter speed is 1 to 1,000. Is it the same as yours, but you stick to 140?
Yeah, usually with the strobe light, you want to have your shutter speed at the highest, but I don't know, 4,000th of one.
For the f-stop and
no, not for the f-stop, for the shutter speed.
Oh, for the shutter speed.
Shutter speed, yeah. The f-stop is the how wide the angle is of the aperture, how wide open it is versus how fast it opens. Color temperature on the strobe is daylight. So that's already set. That's just what they shoot at, which is 5,600 Kelvin. You can't dial it in warmer or cooler. You can adjust the temperature of the photos within Photoshop Raw. Like I could make her in this photo that we have here, like all blue or all purple or anything, like all monochromatic, which is kind of cool. Again, very, very versatile. Hopefully we get everybody's questions here. So again, these were just shot without reflectors, those first three, which was more about chiaroscuro. And here I wanted to have softer shadows, and so I shot with a reflecting light coming into those areas to soften out, so we could see a little bit more information and have kind of a different look to the model. Now we have a list that Shayna is amazing and compiled. Took her forever. I
was trying to, so you guys, we don't have to read all of it to you, but what I was researching is the benefits of why to buy from these sources. So these are all places that sell cameras, but also a lot of them also sell all of the other equipment. They light stands, strobes, lenses, But if you look, like Adorama and B&H are probably some of the more well known. Amazon's also a really great place because they actually do source it from the stores. So I did buy a lens from Amazon, and it was shipped from Adorama. And Amazon finds great deals for you. Amazon also has a thorough listing of reviews. I highly recommend reading reviews before you spend money on a camera or a lens. But I also tried to give the list of where some of these places are located if you guys ever wanted to go physically to the location, if they're open and available. I didn't find them in every state, unfortunately, but there are some in Texas, California. I think there was one in, there's a couple, one in New Jersey, New York, of course. Canada had a big camera store. So definitely read over these and do your research when trying to find cameras. There's one place that you can also rent cameras, and maybe look locally as well, because some of your local camera stores might be able to allow you to rent the camera, so that way you can test it out to see if you like that camera.
Very cool. Yeah, no, it was awesome. She went like, do they do on-site classes? Do they rent equipment?
There was one in here.
Free shipping over $200. You know, that stuff's great.
There's one in here that does have, and I think it's further down, that you can rent a space too. If you don't have a space, some of them might have spaces that you can rent to photograph a model. I mean, we photograph from our house right now. So if you have a wall, you'll be fine.
Yeah, we keep it really simple. Like, we actually are using a lot of the backdrops we use is just like our wall. I have like a guitar in our living room. We have guitars on the wall, and then so we can you still see like the guitar hanger in the background of some of our photos. Unfortunately.
So another suggestion though is that stay on top of some of these, because they either have deals or there's a lot of used cameras that you can buy, and most of these places do a really thorough job in making sure that they are getting that the camera is working 100%.
Or refurbished.
Yeah,
refurbished.
And some of them as well do trades. So if you have an old camera that you're not using and you want to do a trade-in, definitely take advantage of that. So that's a whole list for you guys to look through and research. I mean, I was on these websites for like days. So just trying to make sure I was finding some good stores for you.
There is also a store. I don't know if Gareth's on here, but Gareth, there's a store that sells flash units right outside of London. I got to find that information for you. If you email me, I can figure that out. I had to buy a flash unit. There was one in here
called MBP, and that one has some places in the UK as well.
Okay, yeah, because one of my strobes, I went to Europe to photograph subjects for a project I'm working on, and one of my strobes blew up in a woman's house, which was kind of sad and scary and whatever. And so I had to go like the next morning to get a strobe light outside of London at this one place. That was fun, learning where the place was on the road. And a lot of the places actually had closed down within London itself. Is there something different, additional, that you would suggest for photographing darkly pigmented folks? You know, this works for everybody. I don't think that there's... we photograph a lot of different nationalities, different skin tones and values of skin tones. You would just adjust your camera to
the lighting. I was saying that earlier because I was photographing Vanessa, and I just recently painted her, and she's got really beautiful, dark, rich skin tones. And I did have to adjust the lighting a little differently than I would for lighter skin tones. But it's not drastic. It's not anything that's anything different than what we've been saying as far as maybe 5 numbers up, or 40. Based on, like, you could be at 40 or 35.
Someone said that they used borrowlenses.com. That sounds amazing.
Oh,
I've never heard of them.
Yeah, that's great.
I'm going to try that out. You know, I actually think it's really smart because some of these prime lenses are really expensive. To borrowlens.com, I'll actually write that down so we can try it. We're trying to film better video, and so but I only have maybe 7, maybe 5 lenses. You know, I'd like to try different lenses to get better clarity for that. So thanks, Margaret. That's great. If we know nothing about photography and we buy a camera like yours, is there an auto setting to capture great photos to paint from? There is an auto setting. I'm not sure if you're going to get the right chiaroscuro that we're talking about right now. But again, everything we've mentioned in the PDF should be a guide. It really is not that difficult to take photos. You know, you have basically 2 numbers that you push and pull, and an ISO. The ISO is pretty easy to adjust. If you keep that again, if you want to take photos with the strobe, keep that at 250. It's you only really have those two numbers to kind of figure out and get the exposure right based on what your model is doing with the strobe. It's much easier than I think you think it is. And then the lenses,
and we're kind
again,
of telling you the numbers, so once you get them in, you don't have to really mess with it too much.
Yeah. So, and then right here, we also, on the PDF, I have exactly what I use, the Canon 5DS, which I bought 3 years ago, and I think it was $5,000. Now I think the body is like $1,000 or something. So Shayna used to, I think I gave you my old camera that I bought for $2,200, which was a Canon Mark II, a 5D Mark II, which was actually a really solid camera for me and was fine. Again, it was like 23 or 24 megapixels. That's really all you need for pretty much head, shoulders, or full length bodies. I kind of went higher res because I was photographing head to toe about like groups of 3 or 4 people, and I wanted even more resolution and a full sensor. So that's kind of why I did that.
Yeah, Viv, you'll need a strobe as well, and I'm going to share a list of places, well, a list of strobes, different brands of strobes that you can buy. In all of these stores, you can get them from all of those places as well.
Yeah. And so basically what you would need to start is basically a body of the DSLR, a 50 millimeter lens, a memory card, and a wireless remote control if you want to use it to photograph your artwork and stuff as well. The value, if your whole rig costs you about $1,500 or so, it's a worthy investment, especially for getting. I'm sure you guys are probably tired of working from bad photo reference. You know, I've been learning since I don't work from life. I used to only work from life, and when I got off on my own, I had to learn how to take photos that were really crisp, as if it had as much information as if I was working from life. So this has been fun to learn.
What settings do you use for image copy and still 50 millimeter lens?
I don't quite understand that question. What settings do you use for image copy and still? I don't quite understand that.
Yeah.
Do you mean like image copy? Like cut and paste?
Copying artwork.
Oh, okay. You're talking like a copy stand to photograph your artwork.
Yeah, that's a whole other.
Yeah, I mean.
those are different settings.
Yeah, the setting again, low ISO because we don't want any grain. That I shoot
tripod.
And yeah, on a tripod. I actually, because we just use the lighting in our studio. I'm not pushing off.
You're good.
Our lights are at 45-degree angles already on our easels, and they're also daylight corrected. So it's much easier for us to photograph within the space that we're actually working. We made it like that on purpose, and so we just use a tripod with a remote. The artwork's not going to move, the camera's not going to move, so there's going to be no blur, because we're not photographing a living thing.
You might deal with glare. But that's when you have to figure out the angle of the painting and maybe get some other things to block the glare. I mean, we do all sorts of crazy stuff.
Well, for glare, I use a polarizing filter on the lights, which is a linear polarizing filter with a radial filter on the camera itself. But that's again
different.
I don't want to confuse. I don't want to confuse everybody.
So as far as like your card reader, you want to make sure you have we like to have a lot of space on it, so that way you can take hundreds of pictures and have several different pictures to choose from.
Yeah, so I put a link to a 128,
which is pretty
high speed memory card here, which is good.
A lot of space.
Yeah, and I have a 256 and a 128 floating around.
Yeah, and
they come in SD or CF, compact flash. Compact flash are a little bit bigger and thicker. SDs are really small. I think everything's moving to SDs. Some
cameras take both. Some cameras don't. My camera that I film with does not take both. It only takes the smaller one.
Oh, it does. The Lumix.
So
my old. I think I would go with SD though, because I think that there's less moving parts, and it's kind of become standard, and they're smaller. We are starting to look like each other. I'm so lucky. Next up, we have our strobes and lighting.
So when I first started photographing, I had a Nikon, a really nice Nikon, but the Nikon would not connect to the strobe because it did not have the option. So that's something you need to take note of when buying a camera.
Yeah.
But there is an option of buying a
It's like a hot shoe.
yeah.
I mean, it's like a remote control kind of sensor that goes. So up here is like where if you had a regular flash that you can purchase, right, like a speed light flash for a camera, would connect to this is your hot shoe of your camera, and so they're okay for ordinary use of photographing people, but because we want to separate our flash from our camera so that we can adjust and get a variety of different lighting situations. Having a flash that just flashes out all the shadows on somebody is not good painting reference for us because it's just everything is all the same value on a face because you're flash photography, right? But we want to use our strobe. We want to get our strobe off of our camera again and shoot it in a different variety of ways. Now, what Shane is talking about, so what we do, we keep it super, super simple. We have one strobe light that has a cable that is wired. Now we can get there's different wiring things that attach to your hot shoe that are like remote controlled to the strobe. I've had those before and they break on me. And so I've kind of just stuck with just having a cable. And so the cable that we have is pretty simple, pretty standard too. Thank you. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Vanna. And so it's got this end which goes into the strobe and this end that goes into the camera. So it goes into like a smaller area within the side of the camera. Now, Shana was saying that if you look right here, that little lightning bolt is for the flash. And you just lift this little thing right here. Oops, it's reversed again. This little silver spot right here goes literally right in there. And so now it's connected to the strobe light. And so that every time I will click the button, the strobe will go off simultaneously with the camera. And this is what, like maybe 9 feet, 10 feet?
Yeah.
It's a 10-feet cable, which goes to our strobe light. And we will show you the strobe light right now, which you can see a photo of. So my favorite strobe lights are Alien Bees and Digibees because they're super compact. So this is,
and it comes with a bag.
Yeah. It's not much bigger than the camera, right? So it's a great travel kit. And it's also really powerful. So this is, they come in different strengths. This is an 800 Digibee. I think they come up to 1600. Is that right?
And there's a difference. The Digibees versus the Alien Bees is the difference within the light. This light right here.
Well, one is digital and one is analog.
Even the light's different. The Alien Bees have a pointier light bulb.
Yeah. So this is what the light bulb looks like. So basically what we want to do is
take your
you
umbrella.
don't have the cap.
Oh, which I have to also. No, I don't have it.
So there's a cone that attaches to it. If you guys look in the photograph, this is the actual thing. So there's a metal cone that goes on, which I don't know if we have it somewhere floating around in the garage. Okay, but what we do, you don't even necessarily need the cone all that much. Is this one that's broken?
Yeah. Also, though, when buying from Policy Buff, any of either of these two lenses, either the Digibee or the Alien Bee, they do not come with a light stand, and they do not come with the umbrella. So those are extra purchases.
It's raining in here. I'm just kidding. So what we like to do, though, if you say Shayna is the model. This. No, you're going to be the model.
Okay.
She's the model. I'm the light stand. So I'm the stand. So we don't shoot the model. We don't ever shoot the model. In fact, I'm actually going to probably take this off for a second. Is that okay? We can get back to page 20 of 23. Cool. Okay, so I'm the light stand. I have my umbrella. Say we're doing the first lighting for that photograph.
The Alien Bee?
I am. But I want to demonstrate that we photograph just like this. So there's a little spot on the Alien Bee.
And it's different on all strobes. Some of the umbrellas attach underneath.
Yeah. It's not going in. There we go. Hope you guys find this funny. Actually, I'll even probably put it in closer. Like that. Okay, so I don't want to photograph it with the light exactly at her, right? So she holds still. But you don't have to hold too still because you're using a strobe light. Does it act
as a strobe as well, or just a continuous?
It is a strobe. This is a strobe light.
Yeah. So you have it away from you have the light facing away from the model.
Facing the umbrella. So what we do is to get we want a single light source. So she's looking straight ahead, and I photograph her here, it'll be just like that first photograph, right? Or your chin
And
will be
then
up a
all
little
the
bit.
shadow.
It'll be all in shadow, and the light is going to hit the white of the umbrella and bounce back into her, which is beautiful because it's slightly diffused, but also gives us those chiaroscuros, those lights and darks that we love. Now, if I shoot from the side like here, again, not having the light directly on her, because it'll be too harsh. We want to diffuse it a little bit, like we were talking about. Someone had mentioned a light box before, so this is kind of like our diffuser. Shooting into the umbrella gives us that Rembrandt lighting that we had in the second image within the PDF.
Someone
and then
asked, was the cable connection to the camera in an HDMI?
No, it doesn't. That has nothing to do with the HDMI.
Yeah,
HDMI is for video within moving things from your camera over to
the other end of this.
This is just, it literally is like a
that attaches to the back.
Yeah, underneath.
Yeah,
it's different than the analog one. And so this attaches to the camera, and so you're able to photograph any angle you want right now, and the light can stay stable.
And then you are moving the light around a little bit, just to
and so and she's going to be doing her model things, right? Every 2 seconds, every time she hears the click, she moves to another head position.
How close are you to the strobe to her face? Again, that's definitely something you keep playing with.
Yeah, so we have a model stand, and that's what she was saying with Hank when we photographed our friend's child.
I was raising the light,
we're like
lowering
raising
the
it,
light, moving it in front of him.
Way.
Yeah.
And because we were almost acting like one brain, because we kind of do that sometimes. Sometimes.
I have an Alien B400.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's great.
No, those are great.
I don't have a cable. What do I ask for to buy one?
It should come with one.
Yeah.
Unless you lost it. It would just be a connecting cable. I mean, it's
go onto the website, yeah, and get a connecting cable.
If you want, if you go on there, you can't find one, Kathy, just email me or something, and I'll help you find it.
Do you use a different lighting setup for a portrait versus a full figure pose?
With a full figure pose, I tend also still like a single light source because it's kind of traditional. I will use more. Thank you. I'll use more reflectors. I'll use a reflector to bounce light, and I'll use more powerful settings on the Alien B. So on the Alien B, I wish we had the analog one just because it has a slider for the intensity of the light versus the digital, which is all through these arrows. So it starts at a base tone middle ground, and you add more light or take more light away with these little ones. Is this the broken one?
Yeah.
I think this one doesn't stop flashing. So we've had issues with them because I travel with them a lot, so I beat them up. You can hook up more strobes to this as well if you want to have different lighting, and then you can also put a strobe through a gel, which you could put a blue gel over top of the strobe and bounce different color light that's not daylight in there as well.
Where do you place the reflectors to the full figure lighting? The reflector's on the opposite end of where the light hits.
Yeah, so if we're shooting like this into the umbrella, I would have the reflector over here, or I'd put the reflector here so it got more light into her.
What is the cone for?
Really, I want to just really quick so that last photo that we took where there was less shadowing on her face was because I used a reflector to kind of bounce more light from the strobe light, which is hitting direct, but then bouncing a little bit of reflected light into the other areas so it wasn't so harsh. So again, the equipment is actually super easy to use, right? Since what we've taught you guys today, that I want you, and you can experiment. You can take so many different types of photos.
And there's different numbers of the DigiBees and the Alien Bees. There's 400, 800, 1600.
1600.
And really, you can get the lower one is fine. 400
is fine.
We have a 1600 as well.
That's at the studio.
Yeah.
And so the Alien Bee is analog, so the controls on the back are like push buttons and a slider, and it's a little bit bigger. The DigiBee is smaller and it's all done digitally. These are newer than the Alien Bees. I kind of like the old analog ones a little bit better because I like the slider. It's much easier than these little buttons.
But these are probably some of the smallest strobes out there. The other strobes, which you'll see images in our next,
are a little bit more robust.
Are much larger, and some of them are really powerful, and some of them are a little bit better than the Alien Bees. But really, you don't need too much to help with getting good lighting within the photo.
Yeah,
what is the cone for?
Oh, the cone just kind of helps to focus the light. And it also helps to protect the light bulb.
Yeah,
as
it's
well.
the watts, the 400 watts, 800 watts.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. What?
What?
I can't hear you. Sorry. I heard the best dad joke today. By
Oh
the
my
way.
God, no! Let's just keep going. No dad jokes.
A really quick dad joke.
Oh, I'm so sorry, guys.
So a guy and his wife were having a child, and they had the child in the car on the way to the hospital. And the dad decided to name the kid Carson.
Oh, is it the end?
That's the end.
Oh.
Car, son.
Okay.
Anyway.
I was like waiting for something to happen.
Carson.
Oh my God.
And you don't think that's the best dad joke ever. Okay. Anyway. Do you guys have any questions about the strobe lights
Which
at
we're
all?
going to go over more strobes. Yeah, we have more strobes to, as far as, I guess not in the setup, since we just remember setup.
Yeah, I hope that makes sense. So you basically move the strobe light around.
And there's no like formula as far as like this. You have to have it here. It's all playing around. I mean, this is where you guys need to be hands on. You know, we give you the range of like with the numbers for the shutter speed and with the aperture, and that's where you had to play.
Yeah. So I think the biggest takeaway though is to understand that continuous light, it's okay, but it's not going to give you the clarity and crispness that a strobe is going to give you. And the strobes, I think strobes are kind of mystifying for people because it's hard to get a strobe to connect with the actual camera itself. And it can be kind of scary because you don't see, there's no auto function on your camera to connect to a strobe.
So why would we want the Digi-B over the Alien B? Just different,
for traveling,
just controls.
For me, for traveling, because I like having in the studio here the analog because it's not moving around a lot. We have it hooked up to a light stand in our studio right now. We have a studio outside the home. That's great. And
yeah, do you use the digital ones more for traveling?
The digital ones are great for traveling because they're analog. You have more pieces that are inside that are going to break. If it's digital, it's less things are going to break, and it's also more compact.
Nikon doesn't work with the strobe. The Nikon I had did not have a connector. I had the D700.
Yeah, she had a super. She almost had like a. I think it was like a Rebel, like a digital.
It was a D700.
It was a cute. It was. So the Canon Rebel is kind of like a low prosumer or consumer version of a DSLR, which is fine. I actually don't think that it might have a connector to a strobe like I showed you, that little metal container.
And that's where you'd have to get an external.
You'd have to get you'd have to use the hot shoe on the camera through a remote to trigger the strobe lights.
So we never point the light at the model, just the umbrella, because you wouldn't get any light reflecting back. And the light directly onto the model flashing you would just get one massive light. If you like,
just overexposed.
If you didn't have a light, if you didn't have an umbrella there, you would just be like.
I mean, you
and
can.
it would hurt her eyes too.
I mean,
you don't really want to look at those lights.
You can do that. It's just a lot harsher. Like for us, we want it to be a little. We want light and dark, which is fine because we can get that. If you look at the very first photograph I sent you guys, that is very harsh lighting. But again, shooting through just the transitions of light to dark in those halftones, I like to have a little bit more subtle. So I like to diffuse it just a little bit. It's not.
And when we take the photo, the light flashes. So it just does a quick flash because it's connected to the camera. So every time you take a picture, it
pops.
Yeah.
Pop. And so, like, again, for fluidity, for different models, poses and such, we like to have it pop, then move, pop, then they move.
You don't have, when you shoot with a strobe, do you click it for every photo? So you're not clicking anything, you're just taking a picture, and that will automatically have the strobe flash.
Yeah.
So you're not having to do anything fancy outside of maybe adjusting the light, putting things up and down, adjusting your aperture and shutter speed slightly. Let's see what else. You mentioned you move the strobe around. Is this cumbersome on a stand, or is it pretty easy to just quickly to keep the rhythm of the photo? I mean, you hope that the rhythm of the photo, they usually, like, the model has to kind of
move around,
work with you a little bit. So it can be. That's why I said it's a little bit of a workout. I'm always sweating at the end of the photo shoot because I'm like constantly photographing and moving things, and because you do want to keep the flow going a little bit, but there are going to be times when you're going to have to pause and adjust things and move things and have them move a little bit.
The best light stands are human. So, like, she was my light stand for Hank because Hank was moving a lot, but he was also a child. Usually with you have other models, it's usually fine to just have like I'll hold sometimes. I'll have the camera and I'll have the light together.
So when the
to
strobe
move.
is on the stand, you move the stand around too. Yeah. So I mean, it's just an adjustment.
Yeah.
And you want to. I mean, you can get a pretty hardcore light stand so it doesn't fall over. So that way you're just moving it around and it's stable. Will the camera try to flash while using the strobe? No, because we don't have the camera set on flash. The camera. We never have our camera set on flash.
Yeah, we don't have there's no flash connected to this
so
camera.
That would be where the flash goes up here.
Yeah, so a DSLR is different than a Polaroid. A Polaroid camera always has a flash that goes off because the Polaroid needs that strobe to have an exposure on the film, on the Polaroid film. So here, DSLRs do not come with flashes. So there's nothing you have to. On my Polaroid, I used to tape off the flash, so it wasn't as hardcore.
So never use strobe. Never use. Well, we don't use continuous. We just use a strobe.
Yeah.
If the Digibee connected to the camera with it automatically adjusts when you change the shutter speed on the camera. It doesn't. Yeah. The light does not adjust anything on your camera. You are manual at
you have to adjust it either if you want more light from the strobe. You can adjust that light.
My Rebel doesn't have a connector. Better off upgrading camera or light first.
I would upgrade the camera.
Well, you need a good light strobe at least.
Yeah, you're going to need a better. Well,
but there's different variations of strobe. So when you go on there, yeah, I mean, you can get, like we said, an attachment for your camera to digitalize to the strobe. But there are different grades of strobes, anywhere from. Oh, we're still flipped on there.
I know. Oh, are we?
Yeah.
Okay, I'll fix this while you talk. I don't want to break your thought.
I already forgot what I was saying.
Jeez.
What was I saying? Jesus.
You're saying, oh my God, my husband's so cool.
No, I completely forgot because now I was focused on the mirroring thing. Oh, so that's what, now I remember. Okay, there's different price points for strobes, and so we've only gone over the Alien Bees or the Alien Bee and Digibees, but there are, which we should pull up the link so we can.
I'm going to bring it up. Someone just asked. So
hold on, I'm going to finish my train of thought. So you can get prices from $100 to a couple $1,000, and the ones that are a couple $1,000 are way too overpowered. Those are for professional photographers. Those are not anything that we need to touch upon at all. But the ones that the Alien Bees, that we have are range between 200 and 400 or 500, and which can be a decent price point when finding a strobe light. Let's see. Wait.
Someone had asked.
Never use strobe. Okay. How do you calculate the proper shutter speed for the strobe light?
That's weird. Okay. That's. If you look at the images that we were talking about earlier, I was talking about having a high shutter speed, right? As well as the aperture. I think we kind of covered that a little bit. Is this where you want me at?
Yeah.
Okay. How do you calculate? So you want to have, I always put my camera on the highest shutter speed automatically, which is 1/40th of a second, I think, on my camera, which was that 40 on the shutter speed. Now the f-stop can change a little bit, but I want my f-stop, I think I have it at 29 on some of these. But if you look at the images that we talked about before in the past here, it actually, I give you exactly what my camera settings are for that. And then that's a good kind of baseline for you to use. If you look at this little part of sliver that's kind of coming into the image right here, where it says you can get the information from the CR2 file that tells you exactly that the f-stop was at 129 or f29. What are you doing? Oh, sorry. Was at f29, and that the exposure time was 1/40th of a second. So 1/40. So 40 is what you would set your shutter speed on your DSLR, and then 29 would be what your f-stop would be.
Gary says, I have a Nikon D600. It has a built-in flash. It will not function with an external flash.
Okay, I would upgrade.
Yeah.
I don't know much about Nikon, to be honest with you.
But if you should be able to shut off the flash and attach on.
I'm surprised I don't know what that camera. It's a DSLR? Does it have a hot shoe?
Yes, it does not have flash.
Okay.
Strobe flash. Yes.
I mean, I'm sure there are some cameras that don't work with strobe.
Let's go to the strobe page because we have questions about battery powered strobe. So there are some that are battery powered, but the one we use is plug into the wall. And I fine with it plugging into the wall, but there are probably some that you can buy that are battery powered. That photo is shot. Can you use a strobe that isn't connected to the camera? So if you use a strobe that's, well, you have to have it connected to the camera.
But
somehow.
you can do it through a remote as well. So we don't have to have the cable. This is just the easiest way, and it's surefire. You know, it's not gonna. If we have a remote, I've had remotes always break on me. So you can, and the remotes are way more expensive. But we have a list to it's a CyberSync trigger that connects to your. It does do it flashes your strobe.
And you just connect it to the strobe,
to the strobe.
So we have the Policy Buff brand. You want to go to the next page?
So Policy Buff is the brand that makes the Alien Bees and the Digibees.
And I have a price point of the most of them on here. And I show the back of the difference between the two as well with the Digibees and the Alien Bees.
The analog versus digital. I'm going to go back to the analog. So this is the analog back, which has a slider and buttons. And an off button, on and off button, which is that red button, that red rectangle.
There are other Policy Buff types of strobes, but we didn't put them on there because those aren't what we recommend.
Yeah, they're.
And then Flashpoint has some really great strobes. You could find a variety of price points with them as well. As you can see, they're quite a bit larger, and their connector for their umbrella is at the bottom.
Yeah, it's connected to the it connects to the light stand versus the top of the strobe, which is for the Alien Bees. We really do recommend the Alien Bees is probably the most affordable bang for your buck, and also they're just really compact and easy to travel with.
Yeah.
Versus the other strobes, if you look on here, they look like weapons.
Yeah, and so there's other brands that were recommended that I researched as far as being decent strobes for photographing. But we've loved the Policy Buff. Not that we're getting, we should get some feedback. We should get some compensation from them.
You should tell Paul that I want to get buff.
No, but so some of them also. I mean, the Policy Buff brand is just the lens. You have to buy all the other extra stuff. But when it comes to some of the other brands, babe.
Yeah, I'm doing okay.
You can get packs, so it comes with packs of cameras, travel gear. So definitely do your research with whatever you're needing for the strobe. Awesome. You want to go to the next page?
Next page.
Again, here's some more strobes and umbrellas. You can find umbrellas on Amazon. Some lights, the strobe light umbrellas. They're really affordable. Ours tend to break all the time. We're really rough with our equipment.
Yeah, and then we have a ton of light stands.
We have so many light stands.
If you're traveling a lot, get the lightest light stands you can get because again, you're actually going to be lifting up the light stand with the strobe on it to kind of move it around as well.
Unless you have an assistant and they can move it with both hands, and you have a hardier light stand.
So someone asked, do you
do all the temperature alterations in Photoshop later? Yes. Yeah.
You know what? But we shoot everything's pretty much in daylight anyway, so we don't make that many adjustments.
Yeah.
I don't, at least within RAW.
Unless we're needing to lighten things so we can see things that are going on in the shadows.
But temperature-wise, it's pretty much daylight. So that's what's great also is that you don't really have to. It's not like you're shooting a really warm photo and then having to put cools into the photo, which is harder to do because then it's a digital thing. It's kind of manipulated and it's not as authentic as if you have warms and cools, which is daylight, which is a nice mid-tone between the two warms and cools that you can adjust to be either warmer or cooler.
Can you go to the next page?
Yeah.
And so another thing that we have, and it's not that much of an investment, is a light stand, or not a light stand, I'm sorry, a backdrop. If you wanted to have a variation of backdrop colors or something that you can hang different fabrics on top of. That's also something that's fairly affordable. They have different types, of course, and different colors. For us, I'm always changing the color of the background anyway. Not always. Sometimes I do stay true to what I photographed. But that's just an extra option as far as backdrops for you for having in your studio. And then below that, those are all of the
different types of reflectors.
And usually you get one circle, and then those are covers. All those reflectors are covers for the reflector.
My stomach. Dinner time.
On the website, there's different models for alien bees. Do you recommend one? So there's the 400, 800, and 1600 in the alien bees?
And that's just wattage. For the stuff for the head and shoulders that we're doing, 400 is fine.
Yeah.
I would say if you're doing full figures,
1600
is what you want.
So that's why we have different grades. I mean, we have 800 and 1600, but we've had 400 before as well.
I started out with two 400s at first, and they lasted me a really long time.
1600s.
Yeah. She was an upgrade when I married her my entire life. And
I think that's everything in our PDF. Is that correct?
I think so.
Everything within the PDF is clickable. Like the links are clickable. So hopefully you guys. Oh, good. Okay. Hopefully we didn't overwhelm you. And you have 30 days. David's gonna upload this onto YouTube, and you guys will have a month to keep watching this and get all this information. You have the PDF forever. Just download that and print it out. So I hope you guys learned something. It shouldn't be overwhelming. I feel like this can be photographs for dummies, like those books that they make, because honestly, if you just leave your camera at those settings, trust in the fact that you'll get some good photos.
So Desiree has a quick question. So she's saying 140 shutter speed is low on her camera and 4,000. Desiree, if you hit me up with an email, we can go through that and figure it out for you. That won't be a problem.
Yeah, take a picture, and then we can kind of guide you through that.
Awesome. Whoa, we landed. We still have 2 more minutes. Any other questions at all?
We have 1 minute. Oh my God, guys, we're never on top like that.
We thought we might have to go a little longer. We want to make sure, but do you guys have any questions? I know we've answered the continuous lighting versus strobe lighting.
And drawing closer to light available on DVD.
It is.
Yeah, you have loads of DVDs.
Stop.
Our garage is filled with DVDs. If you guys want to buy some DVDs, painting and drawing DVDs.
They're also available digitally. That's why when everything went to streaming, I have a page on my. Actually, I don't even know how to even get to it anymore.
Do you need to buy one light with reflectors? One light with reflectors.
One strobe is all the images that you saw were shot with one strobe.
Yeah, you don't need a light coming through the reflector. The strobe.
Well, I guess the umbrella though. The umbrella is separate.
Not with all of them. That's what read up when you're buying the strobe. With the alien bees, the umbrella is separate, as are the light stand and the reflectors are separate. But we don't need to buy two. Just one.
One is plenty.
We just have them because he'll take one and I'll need it here, and then I'll take it and he'll break it.
I've broken a couple of these things a lot before.
He broke my good 1600 one.
I did in England.
Yeah. Oh, good.
Great, thanks, guys. Yeah, hopefully
this is the quarantine presentation, guys.
we're kind of matching. It's so weird.
We are. And I never wear t-shirts
or glasses.
I always wear glasses.
Do you?
We're so thankful to have all of you guys here. We've loved putting this presentation together, and it's actually, we've learned quite a bit researching even more, because we actually know how we do things, but being able to now explain it has been really helpful. Missing the PDF. Okay, if you guys didn't get the PDF, then we'll try to re-email it to you.
Yeah, there's a link. I sent out a link, I think, at 2 p.m. today, or a little bit after 2 p.m. to everybody that was on the email list, which is about 80 or 90 people.
Did you see this? Someone said, I almost threw the box to the Parallel Palette. He's taking it to the Antiques Roadshow. That's so funny.
Yeah, we're out of Parallel Palettes.
I know. We need funding for a Parallel Palette. In the meantime, since we're all stuck at home, mostly...
We should take workshops with Shayna.
We have upcoming workshops. David is teaching. Well, he's just doing a demo for an eye drawing and painting, And that is when?
It's a 6-hour class. I'm going to start drawing and demo and
September
then move it
30th?
to painting. September 30th.
And I have an upcoming drawing workshop, drawing from the photo, and it's of Vanessa, my friend who I was just talking about, who I've been painting recently. So it's darker skin tones, and that is Friday and Monday, and that's 4 hours both days. So it's an total of 8-hour workshop. And for those that can't, and for both of us, for those that can't make it live, there's a view only option. So definitely take advantage of that. And then I also have 2 other upcoming workshops. In October, I have a portrait painting of the same reference from the drawing class. And that's a 4-day class because it's a much longer demo. And I think it'll be, I have to look at how, it's either 4 hours each time or 5 hours each day. And then after that, in December, I'm doing a hand and jewelry class. So I just did a jewelry class, but now we're doing hands and jewelry.
I don't know what I'm going to be doing in September or
I'm
very
November.
She's on top of things.
On top of things.
We had a quick question because I want to make sure we get everybody.
Use Lightroom.
No, it was before that. It was.
I wanted to scroll.
Oh no, it was a last minute question. How much does background reflect onto the model? You know, with the strobe lights, it doesn't really reflect all that much, but it kind of gives context. So in some of the photos, we used a dark background, like a black background, which kind of gives us that Rembrandt lighting because there's no reflected light at all. And then we used a white background in the other photograph, so that kind of could show the contrast of the lights and darks on her face.
That's a great question because it does make a difference when painting. It's harder to go from a light background to dark background if you're going to change it in the painting because it may not make sense with how the model sits within the
context of the space and stuff. Yeah, so that definitely plan that out. I don't think the color doesn't really, well, color does affect it because everything's going to bounce into, it's just light itself. It has its own temperature, and that temperature is going to mix with whatever color is reflecting back in.
But you don't have to have the exact color of the background to be what you're going to be painting because I've used a light background and I've changed the background of the painting to be like really bright blue, and it's worked fine.
Do you have your license, right? Your artistic license?
You're such a nerd.
Sorry. Someone asked if I use Lightroom. You know, I use Lightroom only when I'm trying to make really subtle shifts and changes. Lightroom's a little bit more powerful than raw format, but raw format really does almost everything I need it to do. Unless I'm working on like a larger composition, I'll use Lightroom to kind of adjust just a small area. You can change exposure for just like the eye separately from the rest of the whole painting or whole photograph within Lightroom, and so it's more specific. I don't need to usually get that much into detail because usually with the photographs I take, I'm pretty happy with just the way the photos turn out. If I need to adjust things in a finer way of, again, lightening up an area just a few steps, I'll use Lightroom. But Photoshop Raw is pretty powerful.
Do you need to buy a stand for the strobe light? Read up. Most of them you have to buy an external stand. Some of them sell it with it. So just whatever you're buying, whatever strobe light you're buying.
Yeah, sometimes I think they do come in
package,
kits.
Yeah,
I've seen that on I think on Amazon. I've seen that they have. I bought LED lights on Amazon for our studio for the model, so we could dial in the temperature that we want, the color temperature on the model when they pose from life, and sometimes they come with stands, sometimes they don't.
Yeah,
sometimes they come with light boxes.
The Alien Buff ones do not come with the lights.
Yeah, they're all. I think everything's sold separately.
Yeah.
Awesome, guys. It is 6:04
here
in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And
if there are no other questions, we are very thankful to have you guys all here.
It's been great. Thanks, guys.
We'll get you guys this once it's downloaded onto YouTube, which takes a little bit of time just to get on there. And David will email that to everyone that signed up. And if you did not get the PDF, just reach out to David. Yeah.
The PDF was the second I sent. The first link was to Zoom, and then there's another link on the email that I think went to everybody. We had some issues.
And the PDF is a WeTransfer, right? Is that what you did?
It's a WeTransfer that you go to. It's a link that'll take you to WeTransfer. Then you download it from WeTransfer.
And you don't have to have WeTransfer to download it.
No, it'll just go right to your downloads folder. I think. Well, we're Macintosh users. So thanks again. It was also great seeing some of our old friends. Sorry we couldn't actually.
Yeah.
Let's see if anyone's still online. I'd love to see your faces, really quick. I'm gonna go to gallery view. And you guys can unmute your mics now.
It's gonna
Sorry.
be chaos.
I don't know. It looks pretty awesome.
Thanks,
Thanks,
guys.
guys. So great to see you guys all again.
I know. Oh
So
my God,
funny.
so many familiar faces. Aw.
Oh, let
Thanks
me
for
get this
joining us. You didn't take the thing off.
up now. Guys.
Guys, we miss seeing everyone. We can't wait to hug all of you and be again.
Oh, Gary, great photo, by the way. That's a photo
Hold
Gary
everybody up. Thanks, guys.
took. Is
Um,
that where's Kathy's thing?
Here's Cap.
We just see it's like it's like we're at the Emmys. Hey, Andrea. Hey, Cheryl.
Hi, Leslie.
Hey, Mary.
Aw,
That's so
so good
cool.
to see everyone.
Linda still got her
It's
painting up.
also fun to see people's faces who we see online who haven't really seen their faces that much.
Yeah. They're sweet.
Thanks,
Joyce.
guys.
Joyce is green.
Aw,
Laura.
it's so fun. Everyone's face.
Oh,
Hi.
bye, guys. Hey, there's Rudy.
Oh, really?
Take care.
Hey.
Everyone have a great night or morning or wherever you're at. We'll see you guys again.
Bye, Desiree. Bye.
Okay, we're gonna end it. Love
Okay.
you guys. Bye, y'all. Oops, how do I do this? There's always that awkward part where you're like, I just hit